Hey everybody, this is Mr. Beckstrom, and today I want to take a look at some examples from section 6.3. I just want to find the values from these trig functions using coterminal angles. So the way you're going to do this is we're going to look at these. We have some of these in degrees and some of these in radians. And I want to first convert these to standard angles. That means between 0 and 360 if we're talking about degrees, or between 0 and 2 pi if we're talking about radians. And then I'm just going to use the values around the unit circle here to get my answers. Alright, so I did one of each of the 6 trig functions, and I'm going to use kind of my calculator, not to actually find the value using the actual trig function, but just to get it into standard form there. So I'll show you what we're doing here. Alright, so the first one is the sine of 1,770 degrees. So I'm going to do that. And I can just subtract multiples of 360 until I get some degree between 0 and 360 degrees. So greater than or equal to 0, but less than 360. So I know I can subtract less, so minus 360. I'm just going to do it kind of so I can still subtract another 360. Because remember, every time I subtract a 360, it's going to subtract an entire circle, and it's pointing in the same exact direction, so it's going to give me the same value when I evaluate that trig function there. So this time I'm going to subtract 720. That's 2 circles. That's fine. And there we go. So that is 330, and that is between 0 and 360. So this is going to be equal to the sine of 330 degrees. 330 degrees. And that is going to be, so I'll go to 330. The sine is the y value, so that's just going to be equal to negative 1/2. Negative 1/2 or negative 0.5. And if I want to verify that on my calculator, I can do that as well. So make sure I am in degrees. So I need to change that. And then I just do the sine of 1770. And sure enough, negative 0.5. Now you might say, well, why didn't I just do that to begin with? And I would say because if we would have gotten one of these root 3's in there, a lot of times it'll give us the decimal approximation, and that's a lot harder to know what that is. All right, so let's take a look at the second one. This is the cosine of negative 21 pi over 2. So once again, I can add or subtract multiples of 2 pi. 2 pi is a complete circle. So I'm going to go to my calculator, and I am going to clear this out. So I'm just going to drop the pi off, and I'll put it back in at the end. So I'm going to go to 21. Oh, I got to put a negative in here. So negative 21 over 2, which is about negative 10.5. And remember, I want to get this value between 0 and 2, really between 0 and 2 pi. So I'm going to add, I can add multiples of 2. So I'm going to add 12, which is a multiple of 2. And that gives me 1.5. And convert that back to a fraction. Math, frac. That's 3 over 2. I'm going to put that pi back in there. So this is going to be equal to 3 pi. So using coterminal angles, that is equivalent to 3 pi over 2. And, oh, I really need to write the cosine of 3 pi over 2, don't I? That's equal to the cosine of 3 pi over 2. 3 pi over 2. And coming over to our unit circle, 3 pi over 2 here. The cosine is the x value, so that's simply equal to 0. And let's check this one in our calculator as well. So we got to change this back to radians. And then I'm going to do the cosine of negative 21 pi divided by 2. And I should get, and notice this is negative 1. E to the negative 13 means you have to move the decimal place 13 to the left, which is a number really close to 0. That's just an error from our calculator, but this really means 0. It's just it's an error from our calculator. So sometimes you'll get a number very close to 0, and this is really means 0. And that's just because when we put our pi in here, it only uses a decimal approximation for the pi because it can't put, obviously, a number with an infinite number of digits in there. So when we do kind of larger products, we're going to get errors like that. All right. The tangent of negative 360. So using coterminal angles, that's going to be equal to the tangent. This one's going to be much easier because I can just add 360 to that, and that's going to be the tangent of 0 degrees, right? Negative 360 plus 360 is 0. So that's going to be equal to, that's going to be the y over x, remember, the y over x, so 0 over 1, so 0 over 1, which is just equal to 0. So the tangent of negative 360 degrees should just be equal to 0. So check that one. Change it to degrees. And the tangent of negative 360 is equal to 0. All right. Now the secant of negative 7 pi over 6, we're going to use coterminal angles to rewrite that fraction as an angle between 0 and 2 pi. So once again, I'm going to go to my calculator here. I'm going to write negative 7 over 6 and wait until I get a number between 0 and 2, and I'm just going to add multiples of 2. So if I just add 2, that's between 0 and 2. Now I'm going to convert that to a fraction. That's 5 over 6. So this is equivalent to 5 pi over 6. 5 pi over 6. So the secant is equal to 1 over cosine. So this is equal to 1 over the cosine of 5 pi over 6. And the cosine of 5 pi over 6 is negative root 3 over 2. So I'm going to write that as negative root 3 over 2. And then this would just be equal to 1 times the reciprocal of that. So this would be negative 2 over root 3. And this would be a hard one to just do that in your calculator. So this is what we're going to do. So first I'm going to put the negative 2 divided by the square root of 3. Second, square root of 3. And I get this decimal here. Now, in order to do secant there, now let me make sure that I change my mode back to radian. These TI-83s and TI-84s do not, did I change that? Yeah. Do not have the secant, cosecant, cotangent. So what we need to do is use the reciprocal property, the 1 over cosine. So I'm going to do 1 over cosine of negative 7 pi over 6, negative 7 pi over 6. And it should give me that same decimal approximation to verify my correct answer, which it does. So these two things are equivalent, so I feel good about it. All right, next one here. First thing we do is we use coterminal angles to rewrite this in standard form. So this is a big one, 53 pi over 3. So go to my calculator, let's clear this out. So 53 divided by 3, that's 17.6. Remember, I can add or subtract multiples of 2 to get between 0 and 2. So I'm going to subtract 16, which is a multiple of 2. And that gives me there, which is great. That's between 0 and 2. Math fraction. Change that back into a fraction. So that's equal to 5 over 3. So this is 5 pi over 3. And the cosecant is 1 over cosine, so this is equal to 1 over, 1 over sine. So this is equal to 1 over sine of 5 pi over 3. 5 pi over 3 is right here. The sine is negative root 3 over 2, and look at that. Negative root 3 over 2. And we're going to get the exact same thing we did for the last problem. So we're going to get negative 2 over root 3. So I'm going to do the same thing I did last time. So we should get that same value. I shouldn't have erased it from the last time, but the first thing I'm going to do is negative 2 divided by second square root of 3. And I get this value. Then I'm going to do 1 divided by the sine using the reciprocal property of cosecant. So 1 over the sine of 53 pi divided by 3. And bada boom, bada bing. So verified that answer there as well. All right, last one here. All right, so using the coterminal properties to change that to the cotangent of adding 360 degrees to 180 will bring that to positive 180 degrees, and the cotangent is x over y because the tangent is y over x, so the cotangent is x over y. So if I go to 180 degrees, the x over y, so this is negative 1 over 0, which is that right? X over y, and this would be undefined. Undefined. So when we put this in our calculator, it should tell us we get an error message. So for the cotangent, I can do one of two things. I can either do 1 over tangent, or I can do cosine over sine. Let's do both of those just to do a little bit of practice. So let's make sure I change this back to degrees. All right, and then, okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is do the 1 divided by a tangent of negative 180, and it should error out on me. It does. Divide by 0. So, and then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the cosine of negative 180. Cosine of negative 180 divided by the sine of negative 180, because cotangent can be defined either one of those ways. And I should get the same thing, and I do. All right. I hope this helped putting these angles into the standard form using coterminal angles. So for degrees, we either add or subtract multiples of 360 degrees. For the radians, we either add or subtract multiples of 2 pi. And then we use our unit circle. Notice I didn't use any angles that didn't fall on one of these nice 30-degree or 45-degree angles. If you did use something like 13 degrees or 47 degrees, then you just have to use your calculator for those and then do decimal approximations. All right. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Thanks.